Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 154 of Radio 815, the podcast dedicated to examining the works of writer, director, producer J.J. Abrams, as well as his extended Bad Robot universe. I'm Matt Crandall, here with my co-host Marcelo Inostroza, as we continue to watch the second season of What About Brien, the ABC Bad Robot drama from the early 2000s. Today we are going to be talking about Season 2, episodes 6 and 7. First up is the 6th episode, What About What Was Supposed to Be, which is taking place after last week, where we finally, Angelo is dead. Dude is off the show. We've been trying to make this transition for a while to get him out of the picture. Marjorie fucked off. Adam and Summer / Heather are starting to get closer, so he's trying to put Marjorie in the rear view. And Brien goes to work for his dad, and the way he is going to try and put Marjorie in the rear view is by becoming attracted and kind of, maybe a little bit too attracted to his coworker, played by Krista Allen. Marcelo, what are you thinking as Brien goes to start work for his dad, and his dad's like, you're not going to get any special treatment. You're going to have to shadow someone. Oh, and the person you're going to shadow is this hot, young Bridget. So Brien, go off, and immediately it's going to be a, enemies to lovers kind of thing that they're going to be playing with here.
I really like the idea of Brien having to deal with his father in this episode, but I knew immediately when they were in the boardroom and his father was sort of intimating that Brien was his son. I could imagine sitting in Brien's shoes and just having to financially be involved with my father because I didn't have any other choice. I could imagine how uncomfortable he must feel. And I really like it how his father sort of ran the meeting and says, okay, I need somebody to train Brien, and nobody puts their hand up. And then the second after he mentions Brien's last name, this one yuppie guy with a bad comb over sticks his hand up, and then in comes the girl that is actually the one that is going to train Brien, which in turn introduces a new love interest for him for the foreseeable future or for a couple episodes, because you've indicated to me that Brien is going to essentially have a revolving door of women at this point. So I did think that scene to start out was very, very TV, but it was very, very funny seeing Brien sort of adjust to a 9-to-5 job when all we've seen of him so far in the show is this sort of unprofessional man-child idea of him saying, oh, I'm a big video game designer. I'm not going to fit in the traditional corporate world, but because of his financial situation right now, he has to deal with the corporate world.
Yeah, and dealing with the corporate world, is going to be part of this probably going forward in terms of what they're doing with that character. And I think it was interesting that, like I said, Brien, I like when Brien's dad is like, you're coming in, and Brien's like, no special treatment. And he's like, yeah, no problem. And then when he gets this mentorship, he's like, I got to be stuck with someone. He's like, well, no special treatment. But his dad does drop his last name at the first meeting within 2 minutes. And he's like, by the way, everybody, just so you know, this guy is my son. And you're like, come on, Dad. You could have maybe kept it on the down low a bit. We're letting everybody know that this is a Nepo baby right off the top, so they aren't going to take Brien as serious. But then sticking him with, Bridget, who obviously Krista Allen was most well known for being on soap operas and Baywatch before this show. So she had done a small run. And I knew her from the HBO series Project Greenlight, where she was an actress in the third Project Greenlight movie, Feast. And so they showed the whole casting process. And then when she was on the set as they were making the movie Feast, which became a horror franchise, they made 4 direct-to-video Feast movies. And she didn't come off too well, to be honest, in the Project Greenlight. She seemed a little bit difficult to work with, but they were also asking her to do a bunch of stuff. So when she showed up here and her character is kind of difficult, a little bit hard to work with, I was like, oh, these writers must have watched Project Greenlight and they thought, let's use that to our advantage. But I like as she thinks Brien is just an idiot, and then she starts to realize that he's taking a different approach to this job than maybe the people who have done it for a long time. And Brien, almost blows their big landing this house for sale because he cares too much about the woman who lives there. But then he just humanizes her as a person and figures out what would be best for her, and it would be selling this house. And then he does convince her that that's the path to go down. So I liked us seeing Brien kind of branch out and do like a little bit more than we have seen him do in a work setting, because every time we saw him as Zap Monkey, it seemed like he was kind of phoning it in. Like he really was spread too thin. And again, sometimes these episodes blend together, but there is a certain point where people start saying like, Brien, you're doing too much for your friends and not focusing on yourself enough. And I keep thinking like, does he though? Like it's like he does like a shit job at like helping everybody else and does a shitty job of taking care of himself and focusing on his stuff. So it was good to see him actually do a good job for once. And then he almost blows it where he like starts making out with Bridget in this woman's house. And I'm like, they're going to get caught screwing on this bed and they're going to lose the account. And luckily that doesn't happen. So I appreciated that even though this was a very sitcom-y setup, the payoff wasn't quite as cookie cutter as it could have been. Now, we did get Angelo out of the picture, which is great. I was super happy. But what do you think of now? They have this thing where they're like, oh, Nicole is pregnant and we got to deal with the fallout of this. So they decide to stick her in this grief group where she's going to go to get out some of her emotions because we know her brother is not there for her. Like their relationship continues to be garbage. So she goes to this grief group and brings a bunch of cupcakes that Dina had made to the grief group and has a good cry, and then things go from there. How do you feel about this is where Nicole is at for now?
Just one quick word on Brian's insistence to sort of please everybody, and then I'll get to Nicole. Just one moment. I really think that Brian's insistence or Brian's need to please everybody comes from his fear of abandonment with his father and his fear of commitment, basically, right? Because you and me, through no fault of the characters, were so excited for, Brien to have his love of his life, Marjorie. But again, through no fault of the character, through no fault of the actress, that obviously didn't work. So I think the writers took that character trait that they had in Brien in season 1, and they sort of amplified it in the way that I think Brien uses his I need to please everybody. I need to please everybody because I don't want to deal with disappointment because I have dealt with disappointment. I have dealt with disappointment my entire life. First, my father, who I happen to be working for now, and then the girl of my dreams hooks up with my best friends, then leaves me, and then my partner asked me to put a whole bunch of money on the line for our company. I do that. The company goes bankrupt and I got to work with my father. So I do think that that's a shielding mechanism for Brien. So I'm really interested to see if he can break out of that and if he can find a nice balance between making people happy, but also doing things for himself as well. Now onto the Nicole thing. I really think that was a stroke of genius for the writers to kill off Angelo. Not just because I didn't like the guy, but I was like, I really, really wanted more of Brien and Nicole together. And now I'm getting that. Funnily enough, I was watching these 2 episodes. And I was like, this is the show that I've wanted from day one, except with one exception. I want Marjorie back. I was like, this is the show, but I'm like, it's just a shame that it took the show 6 episodes to sort of recorrect in a fun way that I could understand, because in the first season I was so tired of all the squabbling and all the fighting and all the backstabbing, but it seems like everybody now is settled, and I really feel that Nicole and Dina are going to do something really, really special if they can get out of their own way. but also dealing with grief is a really, really fascinating thing. So watching Nicole go through the various levels of that in not only in this episode, but the next episode that we are going to talk about is really, really fascinating to me.
Yeah, it's definitely giving her character some more interesting dynamics to play with and putting her in situations that we don't immediately check out of her scenes, which is good. Now, anybody who's listened to this knows that I kind of hate Adam. I still kind of hate Adam. And we have him and Heather are getting closer, and they have like these cute scenes where they're talking about how many dates they've been on and Heather's philosophy that she doesn't fuck till the 5th date. And they're like having this playful back and forth, but then reality kind of comes crashing in because Adam is having a work function and he invites her because he feels, maybe something is going on here, and he invites her even though we know he kind of doesn't really want her there because Jimmy is giving him shit for going out with the stripper, but Jimmy just thinks it's like a hit it and quit it thing, and he's like, yeah, go for it, man. She knows what she's doing, get that. And we know that like it's not that kind of situation. They actually seem to have like a good connection if Adam can get over this hurdle that this is her profession, right? And at the get together, she thinks it will be fun to like listen in on some of the conversations of Adam's coworkers. And unfortunately, they overhear somebody saying like, oh, Adam, he'll never make partner. Like, we just passed him over for partner and it's never going to happen for that guy. Like, he doesn't have it. And then he goes from 0 to 100 and decides to sabotage the party. And so he lets people know that his girlfriend is not a chiropractor. She's a dancer. And he does it in a way that we're supposed to think he's doing it to like shock his guests and like lashing out because of what he heard. But it's so rude to Heather as a person that like, I'm surprised she even thought of forgiving the guy after this, because the way he used her like a prop and shamed her for what her profession is at this party was kind of disgusting to me. And then when he shows up to apologize, the fact that she even gave him the time of day when he was still so condescending drove me up an absolute fucking wall. And then the final reveal, I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? He's been so rude to this really lovely, like, I really like Heather. Heather Summer, this character is really nice. Like, she's very endearing. We understand why she's a dancer, and like, she just seems like a good person. And Adam continually seems like a complete piece of shit who doesn't have his head on straight. And by the end of it, they have gone to Vegas and gotten married. And I'm like, how did we go from him being such a dick to her at the party to her forgiving him and getting married in Vegas? What do you think of this whole Adam situation, this whole episode, Marcelo?
I hear your complaints and I understand where you're coming from, because it's no secret. I have had a love-hate relationship with the character of Adam since day one, but I'm willing to give him a grace point. I'm willing to forgive him because I think that Adam doesn't know how to be an adult. And I think that he's going to learn how to be an adult through this relationship. Granted, he should not have asked her to the party. He should not have given the Jimmy anything about the girl that he was dating. Absolutely nothing. Okay? Because the way that Jimmy spoke about her, saying that he was that she was a side piece, that she was a rebound girl, that shit set me on fire. You were pissed about the way that Adam spoke about her when they were at the work function, but the way that Jimmy spoke about this woman made me want to.
I was mad that Adam didn't correct him. Because if Jimmy says all this shit and then Adam says, actually, no, dude, like, I think we have a great connection. And even though she is a stripper, like, I think I'm falling for this girl. If he had just said that to Jimmy, but he backs down and he acts like, oh, yeah, you're right. And I'm like, no, if he had just corrected her, then we would like him so much more if he had stood up to Jimmy in that moment, but he doesn't.
Here's the thing, though, with Adam. Adam, for some particular reason, and I don't know where it's coming from, but as a character, he seems a little bit more open and a little bit more loose because of his experiences with Marjorie, right? And I think that he is at a point now where he is going to have to choose something. It's either going to be his life with Heather or his law profession. And I think that is going to be one of the pillars that define him moving forward as a character in this final season of the show. I'm not saying that I wouldn't have smacked him in the face for what he said to Heather at the party. I would have, but I think that generally was growing pains. And also the big reveal that happens at the end of the episode, really, I was sitting in my chair and I was like, wait a minute, what the fuck? Okay. How? Why? But again, I'm really interested. I'm really hoping that this relationship will help Adam be the individual that he should have been with Marjorie from day one. It's just really unfortunate that it can't be with Marjorie.
Right. We'll have to see if he learns from past mistakes or not, and if he can adapt to his new situation, or if it's instant regret. Speaking of instant regret, Dave at his new job is given this video game project that is basically like make Rugrats the video game. And he's like, you guys, Throttle Autobahn, like, you heard of it? They're like, we love it. And he's like, you guys know what it was, right? And they're like, oh yeah, we fucking love it. Tell me about the Rugrats game. And he's like, ugh. So he's going through growing pains where he's realizing, he has had to sell out to corporate. And there is a funny sequence where he keeps trying to pitch like a cooler idea, and they go, oh, go tell it to that guy. And then he goes, tell it to that guy. And that guy said, oh yeah, that's great. You got to tell it to this guy. And at the end of the trail, he realizes they said, oh, we have no power. He realizes it was a wild goose chase because these people know, like, you can't pitch crazy ideas at this company. You just got to do what you're assigned. And him pitching to all these people is, by the end, he's supposed to realize this is not what we do here. This is futile. You're wasting your time by doing this. So shut that down. And he has a panic attack in a meeting where he realizes that, this is a thing that takes a long time. So he is going to have to devote a year and a half of his life to working on this little kitty video game, if that's what he's going to do. And it's such a change from being, the boss at his own company with Brien, that it's a pretty big struggle that he's going to have to work through. But this is a situation that he caused. So, sometimes you got to do your penance. And if it's going to take a year and a half for him working on this little kitty bullshit game, he's going to have to do it. And so that's a change. And then seeing him and Dina dropping the kids back and forth and trying to navigate them being separated. And then Dina gets this great idea to start a cupcake business, which, in the early 2000s, cupcakes were kind of booming. Like, there were lots of cupcake businesses and shops. So, like, for a little bit, that was a fad that I think, they were kind of trying to tap into, and giving her something to do so that Dina's not just hanging on to other characters, was smart. But, they use it for her and Nicole to have some good heart-to-hearts in this episode and to give them something to do going forward. But how did you feel about Dave and Dina trying to navigate their divorce and realizing, in their new lives, they're going to have to strike out on their own a little bit?
I loved the fact that Dave, now in the corporate world, just like Brien is, had a mirror experience from the one that Brien had, because him going up the ladder in this video game company and basically being taught the lesson that it's that no matter how high you go, it doesn't matter. You can't affect the change that you want to affect. In this company, you do what the massive wants. You do what the masses want. You don't do what you want. So it was really, really, really fun and pleasurable for me, because I think that Dave is still a fucking idiot, and it made me laugh earlier on this episode when when Dave says, listen, I'll take the kids, you can spend the entire day doing whatever you want. I'm Mr. He said, like, I'm I'm something. He said, like, I'm Mr. Fix It, or I'm Mr. something to that effect. And to that point, I wanted to smack him in the face. I initially said, you son of a bitch, you're not Mr. Fix It, you're a fucking imbecile. So seeing Dave struggle in this way really, 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 really gave me a smile, and it made me happy because I was like, okay, as a character, motherfucker, you deserve this. So I don't care that you're having a panic attack right now. I don't care that you just realized that you're gonna have to devote yourself to a shitty project that you don't care about for 2 years, because you deserve this. Because as Matt said, he caused all of this. The other thing that I was thinking about with the new dynamic between Dave and Dina, I like midway through their story in this episode, I thought to myself, what the fuck does Dina do? What does she do other than taking care of their kids and dealing with her relationship with Dave? And then I got to thinking, oh my God. In the first season, Dina is a stay-at-home mom. That's what she does. That's her character function. So now that the writers have decided to go down this new dynamic, it's really great that they're taking a fad from the early 2000s, like a cupcake business, and they're giving Dina as a character something to chew on. On the other hand, they're giving the actress something new to chew on, and I'm very interested. I'm very interested to see where that's going to go down. But I still kind of don't like these people, and I still kind of I'm not invested with Dana and Dina in season 2 as much as I was in season 1. I'm much more all about Adam and Heather and Brien and his cohorts. And Nicole also as well.
Yeah, Dave has never really been Mr. Fix-It. He's always been more Mr. Fuck around and find out from what we've seen. And that brings us to the second episode we're going to talk about today, episode 7 of season 2. What about first steps? That basically begins at the bar with Ivy saying another early 2000s fad, and certainly something that they used in a lot of shows. She has set up a speed dating event at the bar, and she wants Brien and Dave to take part, and she's actually even roped her husband in. Jimmy is gonna be in this, and she's like, you gotta do it. And Brien gets Bridget to show up. So like everybody is kind of here for this speed dating event where we can get, a bunch of funny scenes. This is just a couple years after 40-Year-Old Virgin, which had a highlight of that movie is when Steve Carell has to do speed dating and he meets so many insane women. And that was like a comedy thing that people would go to in these early aughts as like a device. Like, we need some quick laughs. Oh, let's have people do speed dating and the people they're matched up with are insane. And there are a few real weirdos in this speed dating. There's nobody named Gina, but there is some real weirdos. What are you thinking as Ivy has set up this event to try and get business, but Brien and Bridget get involved? Dave can't stop being the wife guy during the whole fucking time. And then we've got Jimmy, who's already married, and he starts to hit it off with a beautiful black woman, and Ivy shuts it down right away.
Yeah, I like I just said, at this point, I couldn't give I couldn't give two squirts of piss what they do with Dave, because Dave, like, his behavior as a character has lost me. So for them, for Dave to be redeemed in my eyes as a character, the writers are gonna have to do a lot, and I don't know if they're going to do that. But the other thing that this situation brings up that I said previously is Brian's fear of saying no to people, because throughout the speed date, he has a competition with the woman who is basically who he's shadowing at his dad's real estate company. And they have a competition where Brien gets like 19 out of 20 women, and the person who is training him gets like 20 out of 20. So I really like that aspect of the scene. And I did think that it was funny when Jimmy really hit it off with a wonderful black woman that his wife shut it down right away. It's just really funny. I thought that scene was really good, but I think that I would be more invested in it if I actually thought Dave had some redeeming qualities as a character, because I kind of like I said, he's not like the writers are gonna have to do a lot to make me scream Dave is the best again.
Yeah, and they try and do a little bit of legwork with that in this episode by having him try and be a good dad and him doing stuff with the kids, but it doesn't quite land. It doesn't quite land. And, you know, Dave is still a little bit of the odd man out because of all the shit that he has done.
Right.
But, you know, the speed dating then leads to we can have more humorous interactions where later in the episode, Brien does go on a date with one of the women that he meets. And halfway through the beginning of the date, she gets a phone call. And she's like, we gotta go. I gotta go to the hospital. And he's like, oh, is this a joke? Like, you just didn't like what you saw and your friend's calling you? She's like, no. And he goes to the hospital and she leaves the room because her dad's been in an accident. And his dad's like, if something happens to me, take care of my baby. Promise me. And then I love that Brien doesn't agree. He's like, hell no, I'm out of here. Fuck this shit. Because it could have been like a really awkward thing where then he felt like he needed to go out with this girl longer because her dad had died or something. So I like that they're like, you told this guy no? And he's like, well, I couldn't lie to him. That was one of my favorite parts. I don't know who on this show is obsessed with this, but Brien is having an open house, and so they get cupcakes. And of course, the cupcakes lead to Dina meeting a man and Dina getting business. But Dina also gives Brien a small tray to put in an oven and says, like, it'll make the house smell good. Don't forget about him. Well, in season 1, Dina left cupcakes for Dave to watch at their house, and he burnt the shit out of them. And Brien does the exact same fucking thing in this episode. So somebody on the writing staff one time burnt a batch of cupcakes and cannot let it go because they have done it twice on this show where people have burnt a batch of cupcakes and it's led to some sort of thing. But so what are you thinking as, you know, Brien is trying to up his game at this caravan, they're calling it. It's an open house. And Dina ends up having a meet cute with this guy that it's going to lead to more orders for her cupcake thing, but also could be something more.
Yeah, I like that. Because I really think that Dina is going to, if this meet cute thing goes anywhere, and you know better than I do, but I think that her experiences with Dave will make her a better communicator and a better verbalizer of what she wants in a relationship and what she doesn't want in a relationship. Because the whole thing with Dina and Dave boiled down to them not being honest with each other. Look, your thing in this episode is a thing that is a cupcake thing. My thing in this episode was like, every fucking house that Brien and the woman who was training him are selling, every fucking house that they go into, they, you know, make themselves at home. They drink champagne, and I'm like, real estate agents don't do that. I'm like, what the fuck? So are you telling me in an open house you can just walk in anytime you want? You can take out champagne from their fridge. You can hang by their pool and think about who's winning in reference to who's the better real estate agent. The one thing that I loved about Brien having to be confronted with being a part of a speed date that he didn't ask for, and being put in a situation where he has to tell an old guy that, no, this is as far as I go. Because Brien in season 1, if presented with this situation, would have said yes. But I really think that this episode, in large part or in small part, was a way to illustrate to the audience that Brien is growing as an individual. And I think that these 2 episodes really illustrate that Brien is going to, in some ways, say yes to the situations that he can handle. But in other ways, he's going to say no to situations that he can't handle, which in turn previously he would have said yes to, that would have created this whole fucking thing that probably Matt and I would have rolled our eyes at for like a season and a half. So I am happy with that small character quirk that the writers have given Brien as the main character of this show.
Yeah, they're letting him grow. And also in this episode, they try and let Adam grow because Adam and Heather have gotten married. They wake up in Vegas, shut up and put your money where your mouth is, and they realize they do not know each other very well, because even when the breakfast arrives, we're seeing, oh, Mrs. Hillman, oh, that's my mom's name. And then he's like, oh, are you going to take my name? And they have this thing. And he's like, well, what'd you get me for breakfast? As long as it's not poached eggs, and it's poached eggs. And so they start to realize that maybe they rushed into things. And they both are feeling this way, but we kind of feel like I'm getting the sense that Adam is panicking a little more than Heather is at their differences. But then they both say, like, you know what, maybe we rushed in. Maybe we should consider an annulment, which is kind of an adult thing to do. Like, we're going to realize that maybe we should pump the brakes here. And it doesn't necessarily mean we're done, but we don't need to go to this extreme. And of course, as they go to try and get this annulment, in their reasoning for why they need the annulment, we get a scene where, like, their chemistry is off the charts. It's like these two people seem to have something going on. And the judge even senses, like, there's something going on here that maybe you guys, need to take a look at what you have done and think about this longer, because you say that this was a mistake, but I can see you guys, there's something here. What do you think, as Adam, old Adam wouldn't have had this adult conversation about an annulment and realizing that maybe they rushed into things, but maybe they should give it time to grow and see what's here.
I really like that, because old Adam wouldn't have let it get this far. There's no way that old Adam would have let this get this far. But the one thing that made me boil in this fucking episode was, okay, when they decide to get the annulment, Adam is basically going over the papers with Heather, and they're going over the logical reasons why this would make sense for Adam. And Adam goes on this whole speech about how, he was distressed. His wife had just left him, and, at the altar, he wasn't thinking clearly. He picked up a stripper. He goes on this whole speech. And I'm like, motherfucker, all that you had to do to tell her that this is just an idea, that you're not really, that you're not really, that you don't really mean everything that you're saying right now is, okay, before I start to say this, I just want to tell you, this is what I'm going to say in principle, but I don't actually feel like this, because the moment he said that, Heather had a heart attack. She just leapt on him like a fucking tiger. But I do think that you're right. Once they actually sit in front of the judge, it is clear that these two people have something worth saving here. And I'm really interested to see how that develops. Again, like I said earlier on this episode, I really think that this relationship is going to teach Adam how to be an adult and how to have a relationship that is beneficial on both parts and not just on his part. Because his relationship with Marjorie was very, very selfish all throughout. And I think this is where Adam is going to learn to pull the rope on both ends instead of his partner pulling the rope just on his end to do what he wants.
Yeah, and I think you're right. That scene where he does tell her, like, all of this stuff, it's like, dude, you could have just said we rushed into it and I wasn't thinking straight, but instead he goes full, you cut me real deep Shrek mode and gives her some really hard-hitting honesty that I'm surprised she was able to put aside when they do move forward by the end of it, because he double barrel shotgunned her in the face, basically, and it was pretty rough. The other main thread of this episode is Dina's cupcake business, which, she meets that guy at the thing. He orders a bunch of cupcakes. She tells him at the event that, like, she's just separated and maybe needs some time, but we can see that there's maybe something there for Dina. But her and Nicole butt heads because Nicole thinks she should be running the business in a different way. And this leads to them having some ups and downs with this and trying to figure out how they can work together. But it also leads to Nicole going to her grief group and doing nothing but talking about fucking cupcakes. And it drives everyone at the grief group up a wall. They want to murder her by the end of this scenario because in that moment, they can't see why she's just going on and on about cupcakes. But then someone points out, it's okay to sometimes be distracted from your grief. And maybe that is actually like a good thing, that she's so fixated on these cupcakes that she's not thinking about her dead husband, or, what he wrote on the baby's wall that brings her to tears every time she sees it. So I thought that was interesting, and they played it for laughs in a funny way. But also, that is something a lot of people do with grief. Then they throw themselves headfirst into something else that is just serving as a distraction, as something to get their mind off of it. But then it shows her like maybe life can move on in a weird way. But it was really funny to see all those people at that grief group literally want to murder. Like, they're all sad because of death, and they wanted to commit a murder in that moment. And I like that. What did you think of the Dina Nicole cupcake storyline?
Yeah, no, that was absolutely great. And I really think that it was really smart by the writers to give Nicole that moment of, I want to control everything, and to have Dina say, no, sweetie, this is my thing. And then to have Nicole go to the grief group where, as Matt said, everybody in that grief group is suffering the loss of a lover or parent or a spouse. So the last thing that they want to hear is Dina complaining about fucking cupcakes and the fight that she had with her friend. But as someone who has spent a career at learning how to manage the things that I don't want to deal with by distracting myself, by working, by live streaming, by podcasting, I really, really, really loved it when the head person at the grief group says, listen, if you're going through a hard time or if you're dealing with grief, it's okay to forget why you're sad for just a little bit, for just a little bit longer, because maybe because maybe you forgetting the reason why you're sad can show you that eventually this won't bother you anymore, that eventually you'll get over it and that it'll be okay. I mean, essentially he didn't say that, but essentially I think that that's what the writers were trying to communicate to the audience without actually telling us any of that. For those reasons, I really, really liked the episode. I really liked the scene and the scene actually leading up to it, because I thought that it was hilarious, but I connected to it because I've made a life out of finding ways to distract myself from things that I should be paying attention to.
It's definitely a relatable situation, and I think that they handled it really well. And I do think that now with these two episodes, we can sort of see what the show wants to be now that they've gone through their shakeups, and things are working out pretty good because these episodes are some of the stronger episodes we've had this season, which is nice. The other final aspect of this episode is that Dina, in doing her cupcake business, dumps the kids on Dave while he's at work. And this is just for some light comedy where, he brings the kids to a focus group about that Rugrats video game that he's working on. And they're like, oh yeah, they're stupid. My daddy says that they're bullshit, or whatever they say. And so he gets kind of egg on his face. And then Dina misses their youngest kid taking her first steps, even though that baby is like 5 months older than a kid who should be taking their first steps. But that's just, I guess they got to cast a kid that they can control. And so we're trying to see him balance this work-life divorce situation, and they're both struggling and in over their heads. But because Dave is fucked up so much, we kind of like seeing him get screwed over by Dina when she drops off the kids, and it kind of puts him in an awkward situation at work. We're like, good. You deserve it, guy. So I thought that was interesting that, it's supposed to be, I don't know that we're supposed to feel like this guy needs more comeuppance, but I still always feel like every time Dave gets shit on, I'm kind of glad.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I really, really enjoyed when Dave was trying to go do that focus group. And because Dina's cupcake business is flying off the shelves now, Dave has a deal with their kids. I did feel that it was a little bit convenient that the game that Dave was working on was a game for kids. So I do think that was a plan for the writers to bring his kids into work and to see him suffer with that. So as someone who doesn't like Dave at this moment and who is very, very doubtful that the writers can save Dave for me, I don't know what they're going to do, but they're going to have to pull two fucking rabbits out of their hat to make me love Dave, which I don't think they have left. But I just really love seeing Dave suffer like that.
And we'll have to see if he suffers more in the future as we move on. Next week, we will be talking about season 2, episode 8, What About Secrets, and episode 9, What About True Confessions. So if you are watching along, that is the homework for What About Brien season 2. If you guys enjoy the show, please like, follow, subscribe, tell a friend, leave a comment. You can listen anywhere you get podcasts or on YouTube. You can search for Radio 815, and the episodes are all there in video, audio form for you to check out, and you can comment on those if you want. If you want to get in touch with us on X at JJUniverse815 is the best way. If you send us a comment, we will read it on the show. I don't do social media much anymore. I am logging movies on Letterboxd, letterboxd.com. MDC3000 is my username. Marcelo, you're holding on for dear life on the Elon platform. How can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, if you want to get in touch with me, I'm still on the House That Will Never Burn Down, Elon's house. I'm at Creek Fanatic 88. But listen, if you guys really, really want to support us, subscribe to us on, like Matt said, we are on all the every podcast platform imaginable to man. But I'm doing some really, really cool stuff with the video version of our show. So if you want to talk to me about, Fringe, Lost, Felicity, any movies that we've covered, go over there, because I'm doing some really fun stuff with thumbnails and other stuff as well. So please give us support over there and come and say hi, like, and comment.
Perfect. Thanks so much for listening. And until next time, Radio 815 over and out.
Radio 815 is a Balloonhead Productions presentation in association with Killer Newt Productions.